Hi, my name's David and welcome to the channel. I thought I would start off 2026 by doing a bit of a recap of 2025. It was an extraordinary year in a lot of ways for me. Work is work and it keeps going and it's going well. But all of the things I'm doing outside of work are increasingly going well. And I thought if you're watching this channel, then chances are you're interested in some of the same things I am. And let's go through and just have a look at some of the things that were a bit pivotal last year, because I think last year was a bit of a turning point in a lot of ways. So look, I won't keep you around for too long. Let's get into it. I have been on a journey for the last 4 years to learn orchestral composing. I've been a musician all my life. I used to play at weddings when I was in high school. However, I've never formally learned to read music. I have never learned a great deal of the formal theory of music. I was a performer for a period of time, and I suspect I'm not the only one. There are a lot of us out there who have not had that formal music background, who have come through the ranks of doing rather than learning. And I decided to change all of that for one very simple reason. I don't have the time or really the patience to be a performer. It's not something that fits into how I live at the moment. And I decided that I really wanted to still do music in a way that people could enjoy. And the best way to do that was to get other people to play it. And I thought, okay, well, I really like film music. I do like a lot of classical music, but it's not a huge area of my life. But specifically film music, and I have an interest in video, as you can see, as well as audio. That's originally my training. So I started composing. I started learning. I started doing YouTube courses, and I started doing other paid online courses. I bought books. I listened to a lot of music, and that resulted in me producing a few short works, and those short works started to show what was possible. And definitely, it's been a journey since then to produce anything at all. It's just overwhelming how much you end up learning if you really want to do this. However, 2025 was exceptional in a few ways because I started the year before that to get out and enter competitions. And I've got no illusions about winning competitions. There's not going to be any chance of that just yet. Got a lot to learn. But I did do a scoring competition some years ago, and I did a second one last year in March. That was the Spitfire Colossus one. So Spitfire Audio make the majority of the sample libraries that I use for the orchestral work, and they had a competition to score a trailer for one of their products. So I entered that. And it was interesting seeing the results of that, in the fact that, no, I didn't win. It's okay. But not the person who won. The person who won was then the inspiration for me to learn more about how to use the instruments, because I used sound effects along with the music to highlight areas of the video, but they used the instruments far more. And it showed me that there was a lot more for me to learn in that sense. However, it was respectable. I was very happy with what I did with that. There was a second one then that was more of a video editing competition. This was through Film Supply Edit Fest. And the deal was then to download a bunch of stock footage and then edit together a movie trailer. And I could have chosen to do an advertisement or a music video, but I chose a movie trailer because that's the format I'm most used to. And I managed to produce a very small, quite cheeky, tongue-in-cheek film that ended up being about a dog, and you don't realize that until the very end. But it was a fun project, and I got to choose the music. I got to plan the story and then visually tell the story. So both of these things together around March last year really set me on the path to thinking how I can use the various skills and the equipment and all of the things that I have in order to tell stories. And so I then found another competition. And this competition was one of these ones where you submit a score, and the prize was then to get your score played by a symphony orchestra in Europe. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great? I write something and get to hear an orchestra play it. Well, I already had a piece of music that I'd been mucking around with. And for context, I have an electric piano over behind the camera there. And before work, occasionally, I will sit down and I will play for half an hour. And in some of those cases, I get to find something that I think, oh, that's good. Okay, I'll remember that. So I do a quick recording of it, and then I can develop it. Well, one of those ideas ended up being a really quite interesting idea that I was then able to develop and develop and develop. It ended up being a piece of music that's now called Short and Sweet. And the reason I called it that was it's very much hinting at a piece of film music, maybe over the end titles of a film that doesn't exist, but it contains several sections and it uses the instruments in different ways, and it's conveying a different set of emotions all the way through. And I've described Short and Sweet as being like a learner driver driving around a car park to practice reverse parking. It's got a set chord pattern that doesn't change all throughout, but the instrumentation, the melodies, and the textures absolutely change all throughout. The big thing that I struggled with in producing that was actually dynamics, and I'm still working on getting orchestral dynamics under control. So I ended up with this piece of music, and the thing was, at the time the competition came out, I decided, no, there's no way I'm good enough to enter the competition. But what I did instead was I set about working out what my workflow was and how I work best. So for people doing orchestral composing, there are some people who will sit down and do a rough sketch on some staves on a piece of paper and then hand that to an arranger. John Williams seems to be quite good at that. Seems to work out well for him. I tried the rough sketch approach, and I actually found myself spending more time working out how to fit all the notes onto the stave because I'm not a natural music sight reader. That's not my skill. So I was burning too much time on the technicality of it. Then at the opposite end of the spectrum, there are the people say, just play it into your computer, play it into the DAW, and from there you can work out the textures and all of that. It's trickier to work out harmonies. You can end up with harmonies that don't work. But I thought, okay, well, I'll give that a go. So I tried that, and I ended up with something that sounded really good. The only problem was that the harmonies didn't work. And I was stuck using sounds that were easy to play rather than what I wanted in the piece. So that was a bit of an education. So I thought, okay, well, how else do we do this? Well, there are people who just get a full orchestral score and start writing. That's how I did it. I actually rewrote this about 4 or 5 times overall in the space of about 6 months. And through that process, I worked out my workflow. My workflow is very much I need to be able to hear it at some point while I'm developing it. But when it comes down to allocating to instruments and working out those harmonies and how things move against each other, I need to do that on paper, which was the biggest surprise to me. Anybody who has known me for most of my life would know that reading music is not my thing. I don't do it. I have struggled to read music. It turns out that I can write it, and that's just strange. That has been the biggest surprise. So what ended up happening was I wrote the score on a full orchestral score, including a lot of percussion. That was also new for me. I've never written for percussion before. But I had an idea of what I wanted it to sound like. And so I set about doing that. And after I'd done that, and I was using Note Performer and Dorico to do that, so I could hear it. I was always getting feedback on what it sounded like. What happened then was I used the score that I ended up with to then go back to the computer and record it into the computer. And that also took several goes because it's a different skill to use the sound libraries than to write the music. Using the sound libraries is its own skill. And in fact, that's something that nobody realizes about this whole process. It's so easy to have a piece of software now that you can do everything in. But each individual skill is different. Writing that initial piece of music is a skill. Then orchestrating that out into something that uses a range of instruments is its own skill. Notating it is a different skill again. And it turns out that writing the music and playing the music are two very different skills. Playing the music meant that I had to improve my playing. I actually had to go back and practice my playing in order to play the things that I had written on paper, because I was writing things that were more complicated than I could play. So anyway, I eventually got to a point where, okay, I'm happy with this. It sounds good. It sounds like what's in my head, as much as it can. I finished it off, and then I put it up as a YouTube video with the score scrolling across it. And I put it out to all my friends. And I don't have a massive following at this point on social media. I'm not actually aiming for that, to be honest. Please subscribe, though. This channel I do, just not generally. But what I wanted to do was get it in front of people and get some feedback. And certainly the people who know me thought it was good. Luckily, one of my very, very good friends knows somebody in the Northern Beaches Orchestra. Dr. Martin Hardy is one of the conductors of the Northern Beaches Orchestra. And she forwarded it on to him and said, hey, one of my friends wrote this. You might want to use it for something. So I ended up in a conversation with Martin, and that then led to an offer of the piece being performed in November last year, which was terrifying. And the reason that was terrifying, I mean, after I set out to have an orchestra play a piece of music, it was terrifying because I was now handing over sheet music, which I'm not confident in, to somebody with a doctorate in music who runs orchestras. That was terrifying. So I really had to clean it up. I had to think about what was there. I sent it through, sent all the parts through. And luckily I had a call with Martin at one point, and he made the comment, well, I said to him, is there any feedback? Is there anything I've done there that is completely ridiculous? And he said, no, it looks playable. And I think somebody in his position saying it looks playable was possibly the best comment I could get at the time. It was the best bit of feedback I could expect. That's wonderful. Okay, it means I'm not going to hurt anybody. So in September, I got to go along to a rehearsal of the Northern Beaches Orchestra, and I got to listen to a symphony orchestra sight read this thing that I'd been working on for months and months and months. That in itself was terrifying. I had the opportunity before they started to sort of talk about the piece, and I said, this is a piece that was a bit of an experiment. It's something that I started doing. I said to them, I take, no responsibility for any physical or mental harm that may come from playing it. Anyway, they sight read it through several times in several sections. Martin, the conductor, was then giving them notes that they could then scribble onto the paper to clarify things that I hadn't quite clarified. And I certainly learned a heap out of that session, because that session taught me the things that I had notated that didn't quite make sense to the musicians. And that was one of my biggest fears, that I'd done something that nobody understood. But in this case, actually, it was understandable. It just needed explanation. So I learned a lot out of that. So at that point, I left the rehearsal and I waited until November the 13th. That was the night of the concert. There was a large number of people. It was a huge audience, which is really encouraging to see in the Northern Beaches, that we can attract that many people to a local orchestral concert. I was very flattered by the fact that the concert theme had been named after my piece. And consisted of a lot of short pieces. I was on the same billing as Mozart, which I think, from any point of view, I feel good about that. But I got to sit there and listen to my piece of music played by an orchestra, which is what I set out to do earlier in the year. And it was magnificent. They did a great job. And as well as being able to hear it, I was able to get the feedback from some of the audience who came up afterwards. They said they appreciated it. As well as that, some of the orchestra members came up afterwards and said they appreciated it. So last year was quite unbelievable in a lot of ways. It was a turning point. It was me getting out into the world and and putting out there something that I had created from scratch. And it took a lot of work to do it, but nevertheless, that work has paid off. So now that I'm looking at 2026, what do I do with all of this? Well, I have another piece that I've just finished called Emptiness. It's another very short piece. It's for a string quintet. Very much a sad, melancholy piece. And again, it was a bit of an experiment in how to use the string instruments on their own together. That is up on the website along with Short and Sweet. I've started a photography project. I'm doing one of these fantastic 365 projects where you take a photo every day of a random thing. And what I'm hoping to get out of that over a year is to settle down on a personal style, on a subject matter, and be able to use that going forward as something more consistent. But I'm going to be trying anything and everything using the various cameras I have, which will be a bit of fun. And then lastly, just to top the year off last year, I actually entered a short story writing competition. I enjoy writing. I don't enjoy reading nearly as much as I enjoy writing, which is weird. It's a bit like the writing music thing. But I decided to enter a short story competition, and the NYC Midnight organization run these, and it cost you a few dollars to enter. But I thought, no, the big thing is that they give feedback at the end. And so I wrote a short story based on a theme that they provided, and I then got feedback from that earlier this year, the last few weeks. And the feedback was not terrible. I did a lot of things right. And they also managed to show me a few things that I would never have thought of. So that is also up on the website now. I don't know what we'll do with all of this. I will probably, though, keep entering competitions this year because I've learned so much out of the competitions that I have entered. And obviously, I learned an enormous amount about music and composing out of the one that I didn't enter. So I'm in a position to produce new works now. I will do a video project this year as well as doing the YouTube. But at the same time, I don't have infinite time. I've got to be careful how much I commit myself to. And I can't imagine myself doing a documentary film or anything like that at this point. But we'll see what happens. I wasn't expecting half of last year, so you just never know. Anyway, that's a quick update. 2026 is looking really interesting, so lots of things going on. Please subscribe to the channel if you're interested in music, composition, and not just classical. I've got synth libraries as well. I have a couple of 80s synths down in the basement, and I will be doing some electronic music. I'm also thinking of doing some fusion of the two at some point. I have some ideas around that. I'm obviously into video production, audio production, and I am taking photos. And fundamentally, I've spent a couple of decades learning all of these things, so I can produce things relatively reliably that do what I think that they should be done. All right, well, I'll leave you to that. I won't be doing much on social media. The only thing I'm posting on Instagram, the Sound Footing Productions Instagram, is the 365 project at this point. So if you're interested in photos, go there. But I do suggest you go to the website. Everything I'm doing will be up on the Sound Footing Productions website, and I will be doing some writing and some blogging around the various technologies and some of the techniques and the workflows and all of the things that I'm doing, if that's interesting to you. And I also have put a link in the description below to sign up to a newsletter. Because I'm not doing socials and I'm not going to be releasing stuff on Spotify or anything like that, I'm looking for alternative ways to release the music. I encourage you to sign up for a monthly newsletter. I say monthly, it may well be less than monthly or more than monthly, probably more than monthly, to be honest. And I'm going to be doing a bit of an update through that. So if any of what I'm doing is interesting to you, if it's the sort of thing you see yourself wanting to do, please sign up to that and I will keep you up to date. Otherwise, subscribe to this channel because I'll be doing a lot more of this and we'll be talking about some of the individual aspects of these projects that I've done and whatever I end up doing this year. And in the meantime, have a creative year yourself. I hope you also manage to get a couple of milestones behind you in whatever you're interested in. Thanks for watching.